August 2018. Two vehicles heading north on the M6, one carrying nearly 200 kilos of high-purity cocaine hidden beneath a false floor. The takedown made headlines. It was the largest land-based drug seizure in British history. The drugs were worth £20 million, but the real story was buried deeper. It wasn't the beginning. It started weeks earlier, with a mobile phone, a moment of arrogance, and a video never meant to be seen. £150,000 in cash. Flashy watches, loud laughter. It exposed far more than ego. It exposed a hidden pipeline stretching from Merseyside to London, run by 3 connected networks. The dealers, the transporters, the suppliers, all of them are about to fall. In Warrington, behind showroom windows and modest business fronts, something far bigger was happening. Not one, but 3 criminal enterprises had quietly formed a closed loop. Before we dive deeper into the full scale of this criminal network, it's important to understand who was responsible for what and how each player fit into the operation. Jamie Oldroyd ran the ground game, a car hire business on paper, a cocaine network in reality. He controlled couriers, stash houses, and distribution lines across the northwest. Jamie Simpson handled the movement, quiet, calculated, and careful. His crew of drivers ferried drugs up and down the country, always under the radar. And at the top, the Tobin brothers. From Merseyside, Alan and John moved tons of cocaine into the UK with military precision. They didn't just supply, they dominated the pipeline from Europe to the streets. Together they built a machine. Supply, transport, and cash, each part fueling the next. It ran with precision. But even the most efficient system can be undone by a single flaw, and it can set everything in motion. By early 2018, the network built by Jamie Oldroyd and Jamie Simpson was thriving. Oldroyd controlled the ground operation. From safehouses hidden in ordinary streets across Warrington to trusted couriers ferrying drugs and cash across the country, every piece was designed for discretion. Properties were rented under false names. Vehicles were changed regularly. Mobile phones were used once, then thrown away. Young men, many from quiet, middle-class families, found themselves drawn into Oldroyd's world. Couriers like Lewis Johnson, Moses Webber, and Islam Grana became essential cogs, carrying packages worth thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of pounds. They were paid modestly, a few £100s for a successful run. But the illusion of fast money and a gangster lifestyle was enough to keep them loyal. Oldroyd's reach stretched across Warrington, Manchester, Carlisle, Darlington, and Sussex. At every link in the chain, he stayed one step removed, always careful to keep his own hands clean. Meanwhile, Simpson's side of the business focused on movement. He ran a quieter operation, dispatching drivers to pick up and drop off consignments without ever exposing himself directly. To his neighbours, Simpson appeared like any ordinary man. But behind the scenes, he was orchestrating a constant flow of Class A drugs up and down the country. Both men had perfected their roles. Oldroyd created the demand. Simpson ensured the supply kept moving. But there was one thing they could not control: human nature. And as the money grew faster, so did the arrogance. One video, filmed without thinking, captured the heart of the empire in a single frame. 2 men, Jamie Oldroyd and Towlant Parger, counting money worth £150,000 in cash alongside luxury watches. It was meant to be private, a celebration of success, a mark of how far they had come. Instead, it would become the single piece of evidence that unraveled everything. Because hidden networks and encrypted phones could protect them from the outside world, but nothing could protect them from themselves. While Oldroyd and Simpson built their street-level empires, the true architects behind the scenes were 2 brothers from Merseyside, Alan and John Tobin. The Tobins weren't flashy. They didn't parade their wealth across social media or throw parties in expensive cars. Instead, they ran a multi-million-pound business with precision, discipline, and ruthless efficiency. For more than 4 years, Alan and John Tobin supplied vast quantities of cocaine to gangs across Britain. From London to Liverpool, Wales to the northeast, their network reached into every corner of the country. They didn't just move products, they controlled the flow. Using encrypted communication devices, layers of trusted couriers, and specially adapted vehicles with hidden compartments, the Tobins kept themselves insulated from the violence and exposure that usually took down criminal enterprises. They moved to tons of drugs, not street deals, but wholesale shipments, valued in the tens of millions. When it came to protecting their profits, they didn't rely on ordinary threats. They used enforcers. Among them was Robbie Broughton, a former professional MMA fighter known on the streets as the Bear. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing close to 18 stone, Broughton was an intimidating figure. He enforced debts, collected payments, and made sure those who owed the Tobins understood exactly what was at stake. The Tobins' influence ran deep, through Liverpool gangs, Warrington's underworld, and even the groups operating across borders. And among their many clients were Jamie Oldroyd and Jamie Simpson. Without the Tobins, the cocaine that fueled Oldroyd's and Simpson's operations would have dried up overnight. Their fortunes, the cars, the safehouses, the bundles of cash, were all tied to the brothers' supply lines. But even the Tobins, for all their caution and careful planning, could not anticipate the chain of mistakes that was about to unfold. Because when pride comes into play, even the most tightly controlled operations start to fall apart. And in the summer of 2018, that fall had already begun. Stay with us. There's much more beneath the surface of this story, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss what is coming the next few days as more and more gripping cases are on the list. By the spring of 2018, behind the scenes, the clock was already ticking. Cheshire Police had launched a covert investigation known as Operation Dreadnought. For 14 months, detectives built their case brick by brick, through surveillance, phone intercepts, intelligence gathering, and financial tracking. Oldroyd's flash and Simpson's careful moves hadn't gone unnoticed. Neither had the huge volumes of cash changing hands, the frequent vehicle switches, or the encrypted communications flowing between them. Detectives knew they were dealing with a sophisticated network, backed not just by 2 Warrington Kingpins, but by the Tobin brothers' massive supply chain. Breaking it would take more than a single arrest. It would take patience, precision, and absolute certainty. Officers monitored safehouses rented under false names. They tracked young couriers making suspicious trips across hundreds of miles. They gathered forensic evidence from discarded phones and vehicle stops. Piece by piece, the web became visible. And then, the break they needed. A mobile phone was recovered by Cheshire Police during their arrest investigation. Inside, a video. 2 men gathered around a table in a modest house in Gorse Covert. On the table, more than £150,000 in cash, stacked high beside luxury watches. In the background, laughter, carelessness, arrogance. It wasn't just the money that mattered. The location was known. The faces were clear. The proof was undeniable. That video, more than any other piece of intelligence, confirmed what detectives already suspected. Oldroyd's gang was flush with cash. They were moving serious weight. And they believed they were untouchable. But the net was tightening. Phones were tapped. Vehicles were tracked. Movements were monitored day and night. The investigators knew it was only a matter of time. And when the right load moved, the big one, they would strike. What Oldroyd, Simpson, and their crews didn't realize was that their every move was now a countdown to disaster. The 2nd of August 2018 had started like any other day for the gang. Another job, another shipment, another drive north with cargo that, if delivered safely, would fuel millions of pounds in profit. In the early hours of the morning, 4 members of the network, Jamie Simpson, Claire Smith, Andrew Daniels, and Dean Brettle, had set out from Warrington, driving south to Rochester in Kent. Their mission was simple: collect a delivery of cocaine smuggled in through the English Channel. By nightfall, they were on the return journey. 2 vehicles. One vehicle acted as a scout, while the dark blue van carried the real prize, 186 kilograms of high-purity cocaine. The drugs were hidden expertly. The van had been specially adapted with large metal drawers installed beneath a false floor, making the load almost invisible to casual inspection. But this journey wasn't going unnoticed. The convoy had been under police surveillance from the moment it left Kent. Above the motorway, a police helicopter hovered out of sight, tracking every move. On the ground, unmarked cars moved into position. As the vehicles approached junction 19 of the M6 near Knutsford, the signal was given. The road was shut. The convoy was boxed in by a sudden flurry of marked and unmarked police units. There was no dramatic chase, no opportunity to run. At exactly 8:31 in the evening, officers descended on the van and the car. The driver, Andrew Daniels, was pulled out. The vehicles were searched, and inside the van, hidden under the false floor, they found the evidence that would shatter everything. Block after block of high-purity cocaine, wrapped and packed for distribution, a haul valued at an estimated £20 million, the largest ever seizure of cocaine on land in the United Kingdom. Simpson, Daniels, Smith and Brettle were arrested at the scene. None of them had weapons. None of them fought. Because by the time the flashing lights filled the motorway, they knew it was over. For Jamie Oldroyd, Jamie Simpson and the Tobin brothers behind the supply chain, the damage was immediate and irreversible. Their empire, built on arrogance, hidden compartments and encrypted phones, had been exposed in a single night. And the fallout was only just beginning. The moment that van was stopped on the M6, everything changed. News of the bust spread quickly, not just across police networks, but through the criminal underworld. A haul of this size couldn't be kept quiet, and for those connected to it, panic set in almost instantly. The couriers arrested at the scene said little, but detectives already had enough. The van had been under surveillance, the routes were known, the faces identified. And now the network began to unravel. Oldroyd's team was hit first. Police raids followed across Warrington, targeting safehouses, stash points and known associates. More drugs were seized, cash was recovered, and one by one, members of the gang were pulled in. Some shocked, others already expecting the knock on the door. It wasn't long before Jamie Oldroyd himself was arrested. Taken without resistance, Oldroyd faced the reality that the empire he had built and flaunted was gone. Key figures in his crew were also rounded up in quick succession as detectives moved fast to dismantle what was left of the operation. But it wasn't just the police they had to fear. The cocaine seized that night was worth tens of millions. And somewhere higher up the chain, powerful people wanted answers. Within days, violence followed. Shots were fired at Oldroyd's parents' home. His brother's sweet shop was petrol-bombed. A bridal shop owned by his mother was set ablaze in broad daylight. The message was clear. Someone blamed Oldroyd for the loss, and they wanted revenge. Police issued Osman warnings, official alerts given when someone's life is in danger. Oldroyd and those close to him weren't just suspects anymore. They were now targets. All across Warrington and beyond, the gang members were on edge. Some smashed their phones, others vanished without a trace. A few tried desperately to cover their tracks. And many simply waited, knowing the police, or worse, would come for them. The communication between the groups stopped. People who once trusted each other now kept their distance. No one knew who might turn first, or who might already be talking. In the end, it wasn't some big, dramatic showdown that ended the empire. It was fear. It was silent. And once the first cracks appeared, the whole thing began to fall apart. The trials took place at Liverpool Crown Court, where prosecutors laid out the full extent of the conspiracy. With overwhelming evidence gathered through months of surveillance, phone interceptions and raids, the scale of the operation was undeniable. At the heart of it stood two figures, Jamie Oldroyd and Jamie Simpson. In total, more than 120 years of prison time were handed down, not just to those who carried drugs or counted cash, but to an entire network that had believed itself invisible. And with it, one of the most powerful drug operations the Northwest had ever seen, was finally brought to an end. And now, as we move into the sentencing, we want your voice in this. Leave your thoughts in the comments after listening to the sentencing, because justice isn't just decided in court, it's debated by all of us. Oldroyd, who had flaunted his wealth so brazenly, was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison. Simpson, who had quietly orchestrated the movement of cocaine across the country, was jailed for 11 years and 6 months. Around them, the rest of the network faced their own reckoning. Lewis Johnson, who controlled a key safe house on Liverpool Road, was sentenced to 9 years. Claire Smith, caught returning from Kent with the hidden cocaine, received 8 years and 9 months. Andrew Daniels, the driver of the adapted van, was jailed for 8 years and 6 months. Islam Grana, whose mobile phone had exposed the damning video footage, was given 7 years. Dean Brettel, one of the men who helped load the van's concealed compartments, received 6 years behind bars. Other members of the operation, including couriers, safehouse operators, and street-level dealers, were also convicted, receiving sentences ranging from 3 to 9 years, depending on the role they played. Although many of the defendants entered guilty pleas, defense lawyers for some tried to argue for lighter sentences. They described their clients as young, easily influenced, but the judge made it clear. The destruction wrought by the cocaine network on communities across the country far outweighed any personal mitigating circumstances. Further investigations also led to the downfall of the Tobin brothers, Alan and John, who had supplied Oldroyd and Simpson with massive quantities of cocaine. Alan Tobin was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while John Tobin was jailed for 19 years and 8 months. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like the video. It helps us share more true crime stories like this with you. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us as we uncover more of the UK's most shocking criminal takedowns. And tell us in the comments, what moment do you think truly sealed the fate of this drug empire?